You add a new shiny MonoBehaviour. It requires an object on one of the fields to work, but you're so caught up in writing the script, or you're so caught up in doing something else, that you forget to enter the object when you add the component, and then you press play, and you bring on the null reference def log. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to every developer on the regular, and I do it as well. Well, that is, I used to do it until I got the required attribute. So in this video, if it wasn't obvious, I will show you how to create that required attribute, which might be one of the most important attributes that Unity should have had by default. Now, let's begin with the attribute class itself. It's super simple. We define the class and we derive the property attribute. This class will sit under the scripts folder as its root. We then give this attribute its own attribute in the form of attribute usage, and we set it to be used only on fields. We set it to inherit, and we don't allow multiples. Great, now we have the attribute that does absolutely nothing. So it's time to create the drawer. And I've done several of these on this channel, so I'm going to speed through the main points of the basic class. We have our class deriving from the property drawer, which sits under the editor folder as its root. We define the custom property drawer attribute and set the type to our property attribute that we just created. Now we have two methods we'll need to override. One tells Unity the height of the property drawer, and the other tells it how to draw that property drawer. Okay, on to the meat of the drawer itself. First things first, we want to know, is our field empty? Now you can expand this to your heart's desire, but for now I'm going to show you the basic two. The first is for objects, and the second is for strings. So we create a method called isFieldEmpty, and we pass it the serialized property. Now, if the property type is an object reference and that object reference equals null, we'll return true because it's empty. If the property type is string and the string is null, again, we'll return true. Otherwise, let's return false. Now, before I get to the drawing, if you're working on a larger team rather than being on your Todd, then you should add a section to say whether the attribute is being added to a supported field. So we'll write another method and we'll call this isFieldSupported, which will simply return true if the property type is a string or an object. Now, let's print out an error at the start of our onGUI if it's not a supported field. Now onto the actual drawing. We check if the field is empty, and if it is, we draw something that alerts the user. But in both cases, we're still going to want to draw the property, so let's stick that code at the bottom. Now, if it is empty, let's first draw a help box with the message required written in it. And we'll also want to make sure the message type is an error, because it's an error if we run without having something in it. Next, we'll wrap everything in a color box to draw attention to it. I'm going to use an off red here for emphasis. And lastly, we will make it a little prettier by setting the height of these boxes and then offsetting our position for the rectangle for the drawing of the property. Now we know what we're drawing, we can work out the height. Again, we'll check if the field is empty and just return the property height if it isn't. But if it is empty, let's set a couple of single line heights and add the property height to it to make it nicely spaced out. Of course, the look and feel of this is subjective, so you do you. Now, lastly, let's add the required attribute to our spawn component and see how it works. Now, jumping back into Unity, and we have our castle scene here from Nature Manufacturer. As always, links in the description if you want to pick it up for yourself from the asset store. Now, we can see our spawn field is highlighted to indicate we were foolish enough to leave it blank. Filling it in, we'll clear the error box and set it back to normal. And again, removing the object by simply pressing the delete key will bring it back to having the error box. You will never leave a required field empty again. Now, I hope that was helpful. If it was, let me know in the comments. And if everybody asks really nicely, I will show you how to add automatic fixes to when something's required and it's missing. Otherwise, just stare blankly at the screen and let the next video roll on.